What's going on, everybody? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. This is camera tips and tricks for the TCL 20XE. In this video, I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks for this phone to help you get more familiar with the camera. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out my full review and my other tips and tricks videos for this phone as well. But with that being said, let's get started. So first things first, I want to show you a quick way to open your camera. Now, opening the camera app itself is easy enough, especially if you're just right on your home screen. But say you're doing something else on the phone and you want to capture something really quickly, more in the moment. So for example, let's say we're on Instagram or something like that, and you see something that you want to take a picture of really quickly. So instead of going all the way back to your home screen and hitting the camera app, not that that's really hard or anything, all you need to do is double tap the power key and it's going to open the camera right up. In general, it's not really a game changer or anything like that, but it's a much faster and more convenient way to open your camera if you want to capture something really quickly. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to change the aspect ratio of your frame. Now, by default, it's going to be 4:3, which is fine for most cases, but there might be a situation where you might want to use 16:9, for example, or maybe 1:1 if you're doing something specifically for Instagram. There are plenty of situations where you might want a different aspect ratio than what's there by default. So to change your aspect ratio, it's really easy. All you need to do is hit this icon right here, and you can choose between 16:9, 1:1, or full, which full is basically going to be the entire screen. In this case, that'll be 20:9. Being able to change your aspect ratio is really nice, and I'm glad that with this phone you can actually take 1:1 photos, because while it's probably not going to be that often that you have to take a square photo, a lot of phones, especially entry-level phones like this one, don't actually have that option, so it's cool to see that we're getting an extra option here. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to use the macro camera. With the macro camera, you're going to be able to get really close-up detailed photos. Now, accessing the macro camera is really easy. All you need to do is hit these 3 bars right here. And the macro mode is going to be right here where it says super macro. Tap on this icon and it's going to switch right to the macro camera. Now be sure when you're done with this feature to turn it back off, because otherwise, as you can see, the frame is pretty blurry. Your normal pictures are not going to show up. So again, be sure, unless you're trying to get a really close-up image, to hit this X right here when you're done. But otherwise, when you're taking a macro photo, just be sure you're close enough to your subject, get the proper angle and lighting for it to look right, and you can get some real nice photos. For example, I'm going to take a picture of this quarter real quick. And this is basically our end result. I would say for what it is, it did actually turn out pretty well. The next thing I'm going to show you is a few things we can do with the volume key. Now, by default, if you press either of these volume keys, it's going to trigger the shutter. But there are actually a couple other things we can do with it. So if we go up here to settings, go to general, and right here it's going to say volume button function. Tap on this, and we have 3 options here. First one, by default, is going to be the shutter. Next one is zoom, and then finally we got volume. Now volume honestly doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Unless you're listening to music when you're taking photos, maybe that makes sense. But for this example, we're gonna choose zoom. So now if we go back to the camera, if I press the volume up button, it's gonna zoom in, and the volume down is gonna zoom out. Now, I personally just like the default because then you have a physical shutter button, which is kind of cool. And I personally just prefer pinching to zoom anyway. But just be aware, if you ever do want to change what your volume buttons do, that's basically how you do it. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to mute the shutter sound. Now, you've probably noticed throughout this video, whenever I hit the shutter, it makes this sound. Honestly, it's not really that bad. I've seen plenty of phones that have really loud, annoying shutters. So in comparison, you barely even notice this one. But if you do want to mute the shutter, it's really easy to do. All you need to do is go to settings, and shutter sound is going to be right at the bottom. Toggle this off, and now if we go back to the frame, it's not going to make any sound. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to customize the bottom bar down here. Now, as you can see, we got auto, which is basically the normal photo mode. There's video, portrait, and then pano, which is basically a really wide photo. I really rarely use this feature. and I honestly feel like nobody else uses it either. But basically, those are the features that are going to show up in this little bar by default. But what if, say, you want to use macro mode pretty often? It's not really that big a deal, but it's still pretty inconvenient to have to go to this menu bar and select macro mode every single time, especially if you use it frequently. So what you can do is hit this edit button right here, and this is going to allow you to drag whatever you want into the main screen like this. And you can also remove some features, like for example, I never use pano, so I'm going to get rid of that. And be sure to long press. If you go like this, it's not going to do anything. You actually have to press and hold for just a second, and it's going to vibrate so you'll know you can actually move it. But once that's done, be sure and hit done. And now the modes at the bottom are going to be whatever you set them to. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to use the timer. The timer is a really useful feature if you're trying to do something a little more hands-free, like for example, take a selfie with the rear camera, or maybe take a group photo or something like that. Whatever the case may be, it's really easy. The timer icon is right here, and all you need to do is tap on the icon, and you can choose your time, so we're going to choose 2 seconds. But keep in mind that if you want, you can set the timer up to 8 seconds. So with the timer on, all you need to do is hit the shutter like normal, and it's going to count down from whatever time you set it to. And that's pretty much it. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is that this doesn't turn off by itself. So don't forget when you're done using the timer to go back to the icon and turn it right back off. Otherwise, it's going to count down every single time you try to take a photo, which as you can probably imagine is not something that you want. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to control the flash. Now, interestingly enough, by default, this phone actually comes with the flash in auto mode. And I want to say most phones out there usually have the flash automatically off. But it doesn't really matter, it's really easy to change this. Basically, auto is going to use the flash or decide not to use it based on the environment. So obviously in this kind of lighting, there's no way the flash is actually going to go off. But if it were in the dark or something like that, then the phone's sensor would detect that it's a pretty dark environment and it would use the flash accordingly. Now alternatively, you can tap on this icon and set the flash to on. And that way, whenever you take a photo, no matter what lighting you're in, the flash is still going to activate. Now, if you don't want to do that, you can also turn the flash all the way off. And now, similarly, no matter what your lighting is, the flash is never going to activate. I personally like to keep it all the way off unless there's absolutely a reason to use it. But of course, different things are going to work for different people. So definitely play around with it to see what setting works best for you. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to change your video quality. Now with this phone, you can shoot video in up to 1080p, which is pretty standard for a phone in this price range. So definitely not bad, but you can also change the video quality if you want. So to do this, we're going to go to settings. And as you can see right here where it says video quality, it's currently at 1080p, but if we tap here, you can change it to 720p or 480p. Now the last thing I'm going to show you is how to change your storage location. What I mean by this is basically when you take a photo or video, if you have a microSD card, you can actually set it to automatically save that to the microSD card, so you don't need to worry about offloading your photos and videos later. So all you need to do for this is go to settings, go all the way down, and right here where it says storage, you're going to tap here and you'll be able to select the microSD card. Now, of course, it doesn't work for me because I don't have a microSD card in this phone right now. But if you do, just keep in mind that this is where you're going to go to set your photos and videos to save right to the microSD card. But those were my camera tips and tricks for the TCL 20XE. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And again, if you want to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out my full review and other tips and tricks videos for it as well. But that's it for this video. As always, I will see you in the next one.